What's going on, Wildcard Round? That's your the charge. And today I have the pleasure of having Randy Hardman talking some Bills Wildcard Review. Randy, thank you so much for joining us today. It seems from one Bills drive today we're talking. I was just hearing from Sean McDermott, and now you just showed up from the podium. Welcome, man.
Hey, how's it going?
Awesome. Glad to have you back in the show, and a lot of stuff to talk about. And Bills Mafia, join us. You feel free to comment on the chat and interact with us. This episode will also be available on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and all the podcast aggregators. So, Randy, I'm really curious to start talking about to put the regular season behind us, right? And to talk to a little bit about those last few games, this Bills win streak, and how the Bills were able to figure it out and win 5 games in a row, get in the playoffs, win the division against the favorite Dolphins with all the advantage in the world that they couldn't hold on that divisional title. So, how do you see this team so far and entering the playoffs on a run? How confident are you with this Bills team?
Well, I mean, going into the playoffs, I'm really confident. You're talking about it's been a tale of 2 seasons for us so far, and now we're getting into the 3rd season. So, the first, before the bye, basically the first, I guess 2/3 of the season, they were one way, and then the bye and the article came out, and they went on a tear. They went on a 5-game run, and now we're in the playoffs, and we're the number 2 seed, and we got a home playoff game against a 7, and it couldn't have really set up any better for us, I think. I'm not trying to look past Pittsburgh, but for all intents and purposes, we should be able to beat them and then move on to the next round. And, then it'll be, a more competitive game, but the draw sets up very well. And I'm confident that this team is kind of getting hot at the right time. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, man, me too. I haven't been so high anymore on getting the divisional title, or even on home games, because I felt on previous years, I felt like the Bills, the lack of a consistent running game and some offensive line struggles kind of made the Bills suffer more with that cold weather, snow stuff, or even the strong winds. But this season we've seen a more physical team, a more physical Bills team, with the offensive line being able to establish the run game to impose themselves against other opponents. Obviously, it's going to be a huge fight against these Pittsburgh Steelers. This is a physical team as well. So looking forward to watching this battle on the trenches. But I feel more confident. I feel like this year was a good year to win the division, to have a home advantage during the playoffs, and to be able to just like you said, to get a nice drawing in the playoffs. I feel like the Bills are in a good position to take advantage of that, right? And another thing that I want to still talk to you, it's been a long time since our last or since your last participation. Not so long, but I believe the last time we talked about it here on the show, I feel pretty confident that we weren't so high on Sean McDermott at that point, or at least we weren't so happy with the way he was carrying himself and his team and dealing with all the stuff, and especially with the results. I also feel pretty confident that I've seen a lot of growth from him, and a lot of good adjustments, a lot of changes that I was really looking forward to seeing from him for a long time now, and I feel like I could see some of that happening in those 5 games. How's your opinion about how Coach McDermott has dealt with the criticism? With as he even himself said, it was maybe the darkest time as a Bills coach for him, dealing with the Titans article, all all the noise in the media about his coaching situation and his seat being a little bit warm, and then this stretch with 5 wins, and especially with some wins with him being in the position that he struggled the most, dealing with late game situations, the defense needing to close out games, and we could see a change in his behavior, in the way he called this defense, in the way he dealt with these situations. How do you feel about Coach McDermott, the adjustment so far, and going forward, entering maybe the most important part, right? Because if he can't do that, just like he did against the Chiefs and against in other games also, against the Dolphins as well, he was more aggressive closing out games. He gonna be able to do that in the playoffs as well, right?
Yeah, and I mean, again, you're talking about a tale of two seasons. I mean, for the first half of the year, after the bye, I mean, you couldn't be too pleased with the job that he was doing, even though it's admirable the way that they filled in the holes in the defense because of injuries, and I totally respect that. But it was still a lot of the same kind of flaws showing in his game coaching wise. And then that article hit, and credit to him for doing some self scouting and really kind of I think trying to mend the holes in his game. And the team rallied around him, and they rattled off these 5 straight, hopefully 4 more. And I admire the job that he's done the second half of this season. Really, I do, because it would have been easy to kind of go into a shell and say, poor me, but he didn't do that. And I think that he's in a good spot going into the playoffs. I didn't like the way that he called Josh out at halftime the other week. I thought that was a little bit of a peek into the old McDermott that was referenced in the article. But aside from that, I think he's done a great job these last 5 games, and I'm excited for it.
Yeah, man, it's awesome that you mentioned that. I see it as you do, despite a lot of people not being big on that. I feel like it was totally unnecessary to do, especially through the media. And I also understand that he was maybe a bit of a hothead at that moment during the game, and just was caught by the reporter and spilled it out, right? But still, he's the head coach. He should know better, that he should just give any kind of vanilla answer there and deal with his own quarterback or his offensive coordinator or whoever he wanted to address that situation directly to them, and not through the media.
He's the king of the generic non-answer, and then all of a sudden at halftime, he decides to get direct and specific about pointing, right at his franchise quarterback. And I just thought that was,
exactly. I've never seen him.
Yeah, but you don't put that out on national TV, and that was the whole point.
Exactly. A lot of people, I tweeted about it, and a lot of people were like, he didn't lie, he was right. And I was like, okay, he could be right, and no problem. But he wasn't right to tell the reporter, because the reporter wouldn't help him. The reporter wouldn't get to Josh and tell Josh, look, Josh, you shouldn't have done that. And Josh would be, oh, now that the reporter is telling me I'm going to change. No, it's never happening. And you can even cause some problems with your franchise quarterback or the player that you address that way. And also, after the 13 seconds, we remember how he addressed the media and how he was obviously hiding stuff, and he never was open about what happened, who called the defense, and who asked the players to drop on the coverage like 15 yards, play soft zone coverage and stuff, and they never addressed that. They kept it in-house. So solve your problems in the locker room. Tell your quarterback or whoever you want to address behind the doors, right? Not in front of the media, in front of all the country. And I agree with you. But just like you said, maybe it's natural. Maybe that's something he got to fight against. And the same thing can be said about his posture when he's on those pressure situations and needing to win the game with the defense. And he's like, oh, I can't give up the big play, and I need to be sure that we won't give up a touchdown. And he even used it to give other teams game-time field goals just to avoid the touchdown, And we saw a little bit of change. He might be really fighting against those fears, but he's being able to fight them, and it's really promising in my opinion. And I felt like even against the Chiefs, that play that came back thankfully, where the Chiefs scored a touchdown and Tony was lined up wrongly and it was a foul. I feel like he was rewarded for being brave, for being courageous, and his aggressiveness. It was rewarded with that situation not resulting in a game-winning touchdown. Because if that did, it maybe it would be awful for the Bills, right? So he started to gain confidence. He started to put his players in position. That's the big thing. When he played prevent or big time prevent and soft coverage late in games, he wasn't putting his players in position to make plays for him. How could Levi Wallace or anybody else make a play on Travis Kelce on that 13 seconds if he was lining up 15 yards away from Kelce, right? And it was a quick pass with all the advantage in the world for the tight end. So I feel like he's trusting more his players. He's risking more, and it's being rewarded recently. And now the playoffs are just ahead. As critical as I've been about McDermott this season, I always said, look, he still has this season. He still has maybe the playoffs to change. Not Fernando Schmude way of viewing, but everybody else, and everybody was fearing for the worst with him, right? And it seems like he's going the right direction and fixing stuff. And even in his interviews, I see a more how could I put that? I feel like he's more easygoing, a little bit more calm, and not so. Sometimes it felt a little bit like an arrogancy, but no, he's very humble right now, talking to the media and addressing them. I feel like that article humbled him down.
Yeah, I think that's a direct result of some of the criticisms in that article and him looking in the mirror and being like, maybe I do need to loosen up a little bit. Maybe I do need to try and relate a little bit more to some of these guys, I mean, and especially in such a high pressure job. I mean, being a head coach in the NFL is a tremendous job. It's 100% pressure all the time. So like, I totally get where he would kind of insulate himself, to try and keep out as much of the noise as possible. But then sometimes, and again, the point of the article, you can debate that, whichever side you fall on it. But I think some of those criticisms, he kind of touched home for him, and he decided to make a change. And credit to him for doing that, because not everyone can do that, and he has so far. And it's a credit to him. So I was asked last night what I would give him for a grade for the season, and I think right now it's a C, just based on the front half and the back half combined. But there is a opportunity for him, to close this thing out and to really cement kind of a storybook season, good and bad. So it's like I said, it's going to be some of the most fun playoffs we've seen in a while. I think it's set up very well, and I'm excited.
Yeah, man, it's definitely a testament of his character that he felt like it was attacked. I personally didn't think it was like an attack to his character, that article, because there were some players out there telling how awesome of a man, of a character he is, and how he cares about the Bills winning. And it wasn't only criticism, right? I feel like a lot of people didn't even read the article and were like calling it out, but he felt that way.
Yeah,
and he could change.
I didn't view it as a character assassination piece or anything like that. Like, a lot of people were going really extreme and saying that it was some sort of a character hit piece, and I didn't view it that way at all. I thought most of it was revolved around like his approach and some of the contradictions that that he might. And it's not like something he was voluntarily or that he was consciously doing. It was like his natural inclination was to drift in a certain direction. And, it came across a way that he didn't understand. And look, I get that, I mean, everybody, I think, might come across a way sometimes that they don't intend. It's just that in his job, it's amplified a lot. So I didn't view it in the same way that a lot of people did. But irregardless, the players reacted to it, and so is the coach, and it's all been for the better. So whether he meant to or not, Ty Dunne did us a great service in releasing that article at the time he did.
Yeah, there were people criticizing him for releasing that article at that point, and I remember telling people about it. Like, look, if there is an impact to be made by this article, it's gonna be positive, because if players disagree and if players feel like they were attacked or his head coach were attacked and they still play for their head coach, they will need to answer to this article on the field. There's no other place to give an answer, right? And they've done that, and huge props for them.
For a coach that uses bulletin board material at any opportunity, I mean, what more could you ask for? Knowing that the team rallied around him the way they did. I mean, it would be one thing if that came out and all of his teammates were like, or all the guys on the team were like, oh yeah, well this article's 100% right. He'd be saying, oh shit. But he didn't, because they all rallied around him. So now he's like, I got my whole squad behind me. And, you know, we're all playing for each other. This whole one voice, one team mantra thing. And it's kind of coming together at the right time. So again, you know, I don't think it was his intention, but Ty Dunne, he kind of stirred something up in a good way.
Sure. Bills Mafia, hit that like button, subscribe to Buffalo Rumblings channel. And so, Randy, a lot of people already commenting here in the chat. King21, go Bills, good luck with Pittsburgh Sunday. Thank you so much. We hope all the luck. We wish all the luck to the Buffalo Bills. And Cristiano Stolano, hello guys, any concern about the weather? Yeah, the weather forecast for this game is a little bit worrisome. It's not Kansas City like, but it's problematic. How are you viewing this situation, Randy?
How do I view the weather? Well, I look at it from the perspective of who do we have under center versus who do they have under center? You know, we have arguably the best player in the league, one of the top quarterbacks in the league, one of the biggest physical freaks in the league, as well as one of the best offensive lines in the league. So even if the passing game is diminished due to the weather, we still have a 1,000-yard rusher, the best rushing quarterback in the league from a physical standpoint, and a top-tier offensive line. So am I concerned about it? Slightly, but not really, because on the other side, they have a big plotting running back in Najee Harris, and they got Mason Rudolph, who is in no way, shape, or form anything close to what Josh Allen brings. So is it a concern? A minor one, but it's not that much of a concern.
Yeah, man. I every time I see those weather forecasts for this kind of game, I kind of wish we were playing on a dome or in a dome or a bad weather, because I feel like, okay, maybe we won't be able to see the best version of Josh Allen out there and playing his best game of his career and things like that. But when we start to look to the opponent side and how much more this weather will impact their way, right? The way they play. Just remember that windstorm game against the Patriots and how Josh could throw the ball. Mac Jones couldn't throw the ball. They weren't throwing the ball at all, right? And so, just like you said, Mason Rudolph will have way more of a hard time with dealing with all of that than Josh. And even looking at the Cowboys game or the Patriots game when Josh didn't play so well against the Patriots, throwing the ball, we could see Josh impacting the game, impacting the running game, running the ball himself, being a distraction on some of those zone read plays, or even just handing the ball off and faking it, right? And the defense needs to pay attention to him, needs to pay attention all the time to him. So I feel like Josh can impact the game, even not throwing the ball well. He still can impact the game in a lot of ways, right? With his legs, with obviously his can off an arm when needed. And I don't feel like the Pittsburgh Steelers will be able to have the regular offense playing well out there in those kind of situations. They will need to run the ball, and if the Bills can stop them, they will be in a big time trouble, right? So I really feel at the end of the day, the advantage is Bills. Even if the Bills are not playing at 100%, they are playing at 70%. The other team will be playing at 30% maybe on offense, right? So sure. I feel like
in Pittsburgh, I mean, really, if you look at the last month or so, once Rudolph kind of took over, a lot of times they get big plays from either deep shots or like crossing routes that either Pickens or Deontay Johnson takes deep. And in a weather game and against this defense, I just don't see that being something that they can really rely on to keep pace with this team and what we bring to the table, especially with TJ Watt out. I mean, Highsmith is a great player. I get it. They have some good players on defense, but and Fitzpatrick is always one that you got to keep an eye out for in the secondary, and Joey Porter Jr. And I mean, like we know their guys, but I just don't see them being able to go blow for blow with this team in a high scoring game or even in a grinded out type game. I mean, they just don't have the versatility to keep the defense on its heels as much as we do. So,
Yeah, man. I remember in the preseason we faced the Steelers, right? And it looked like the Pittsburgh Steelers were up and coming, because obviously preseason is sometimes fool's gold, but for one drive or for a couple of drives, it seemed like okay. It seems like Kenny Pickett is ready to play well and to at least be a kind of an elite game manager, putting the ball in the hands of the guys who can make plays. They have some nice wide receivers out there, and they have some weapons. Najee Harris on the backfield, just like you said, and it felt like, look, the Pittsburgh Steelers are up and coming. And fast forward to 2024, the Bills facing them. How far from this assessment are we right now, Randy, with Pickett not even playing anymore?
Well, the preseason is a liar, and not having your starting quarterback obviously is a factor. You can't ignore the fact that Kenny Pickett may not set the world on fire, but he's definitely better than Mason Rudolph. And there's a reason why they brought in Mitch Trubisky last offseason as the backup. So, Pittsburgh looked good in the preseason. It's a long season. That was a long time ago. It's a totally different team on both sides of the ball now. And, I mean, we're better. Flat out. We're the better team. We should win the game.
Yeah, man, I agree 100%. And still talking about the Steelers, one of the things that I felt like after the game, or when the Bills were winning the game against the Dolphins, I really wanted that win, because obviously winning the division, especially against the Dolphins, and with all the trash talk, or I won't even call it trash talk, because I feel like the Miami Dolphins fans really felt that way. Like they weren't talking trash. They were really feeling like they were better, or that Tua is better than Josh, and this kind of nonsense, in my opinion, right? But they were feeling and talking a lot of trash to all Bills Mafia, and then they just allowed the Bills to come back and win the division. So I wanted it really badly, and the Bills could do that. But one of the lowlights of that winning that game, in my opinion, was like I felt less worried about playing the Dolphins again than playing the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I felt that way because for some reasons, but just like I told you, I feel like the Pittsburgh Steelers they play a brand of physical football that the Bills sometimes struggle against, or that make things tougher for our offensive line, and I feel also like Mike Tomlin. My goodness, what about this guy? Because every year it seems like, oh, that's the year Mike Tomlin is gonna have a losing record, and he finds a way to turn it around, and he ends making the playoffs, man. So yet again, Mike Tomlin could keep his winning seasons streak going, right? So I really feared Pittsburgh more than Miami, even though I believe we are better than both. How do you feel about this situation with facing the Steelers instead of Miami? Am I maybe disrespecting Miami too much and thinking that the Steelers could be more dangerous than them, or do you kind of agree? How do you feel about that? As Pedro disagrees with me because he put 77-3 score, right? So how do you feel about this assessment with Miami Dolphins and Pittsburgh Steelers?
Honestly, I'm not worried about either one of them.
Yeah.
We've proven against this let me get my air quotes going here, this revolutionary and high flying and genius offense, we've proven it not once, not twice, not 3 times, but like 4 separate times. We've proven that we can shut this team down in the second half, and they've done it repeatedly, including this last time. So, it's nice, all the numbers and pretty long touchdowns and Tyreek Hill and highlights and everything else. But guess what? We kind of got their number. So I wasn't really worried about playing Miami a third time. Pittsburgh, I'm even less worried about because they have less firepower than Miami does. And yeah, they got a little bit more of a rough and tumble running game. But I mean, again, you're going to run the ball 40 times a game, 30 some odd times a game when you're down 3 scores? Probably not. So I'm not really worried about Pittsburgh. I wasn't really worried about Miami. If by some stroke of luck they beat Kansas City this weekend, I'll be looking forward to that game even more. Honestly, the only 2 teams in the playoffs that I'm really concerned about are Cleveland because of that defense, and Kansas City because you got to beat them when it counts. And the playoffs is when it counts the most. So once you can slay that giant, you can kind of put it behind you and move on. So those are the teams I'm worried about in the playoffs. Everybody else is, I think we have a very good chance at beating, probably better than not. And I would expect it nothing less.
Man, now I'm really curious because when you said 2 teams, I was pretty sure that Ravens were one of them. And to be honest, I feel like you about Cleveland, but the Baltimore Ravens would be the other one because I feel really like they are this kind of physical team, play tough defense, and I like Lamar Jackson as a quarterback, despite he not having huge success against teams in the past, right? And I feel like they have a well-balanced team, and I'm very confident the Bills can this time finally get past the Kansas City Chiefs if this opportunity arises in this playoffs.
I didn't forget about the Ravens. I did not forget about the Ravens.
So curious, man.
I feel like we match up very well against Baltimore, and we kind of had the advantage in several key matchups against them, both on offense and defense. So I didn't forget about them, but I do think that we should be a favorite against Baltimore if we go head to head.
Great, man. Great talk. And so one of the things that I really feared the Pittsburgh Steelers when I was thinking about these parallels with the Miami Dolphins, the possibilities coming playoff time, was TJ Watt, obviously. That guy is a game changer, playing probably the defensive player of the year, play at a really high level, and can make a lot of game-changing plays, right? And he's out. It's been awesome for the Bills that he's not going to play against the Bills. Yeah, but we are also dealing with some injuries, and I have the injury report here, and Coach McDermott was speaking just as we started the show, and he talked how he said that Gabe is out, Taylor Rapp is out for this game, right? And we have other guys. Terrell Dodson is Coach McDermott said we will see, right? Terrell Dodson and there are other guys a little bit banged up. How worried are you about not having those guys out there? Gabe Davis, obviously team captain. He's been wide receiver 2 for quite some time now. But last game, Sherfield finally appeared, right, and finally played decently to the point that I was like, I'm that a person that can't wait to move on from Gabe Davis. I can't lie, okay? Sorry, I love the guy as a person, hard worker. Love him as wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, but as wide receiver 2, let's move on. And I was ready to give Gabe Davis snaps to Sherfield because he's getting better. He finally showed up. Let's ride the hot hand, right? So, how do you feel about those guys being out? Taylor Rapp is out. Is another guy. It's a possibility for another guy who I was betting this season to play well if an opportunity arises. And And I felt like Cam Lewis has done that this season in his opportunity to play even better than Rep, despite Rep playing really well last week and make the game clinching play. How do you see those guys being banged up in this important game for the Bills?
Well, I mean, it's next man up. They have to they got to move in. I'll be interested to see if Elam is active to kind of rotate in at corner with Douglas being out if he ends up not playing. Cam Lewis, I think, is going to be able to step in fine in place of Taylor Rapp in the packages that he plays in. So, I mean, yeah, we have some injuries, but I think the guys that they have behind them are more than capable of stepping in for this game. And, if it's going to be a game where you have a couple guys out in the playoffs, this is the one to have it. So don't push them. Let them get the rest for the following week and kind of go from there. But our injuries are not as much of a concern because of the opponent that they might be normally.
Yeah, man, and that defense, even without TJ Watt, right? They have Cam Hayward, they have Kenu Benton, they have Ogunjobi on the defensive line. They are a big defensive line. They are physical. You already mentioned Highsmith, who's been playing great, right? I feel like that's the kind of defense that can make things tougher for offensive line and can avoid what happened to the Cowboys, for example, that the Bills can run the ball easily all game long, and it makes things very easy for offense. I feel like the Pittsburgh Steelers with this weather game might be in position to make things harder for a running game and to force Josh to throw the ball more than the Bills want maybe to do in this kind of weather.
So
how
here's
do you see the situation, man, with those guys being able to poise this
yeah,
threat for the Bills?
Here's the way I see it is that with Pittsburgh's strength up front, I think what you really want to do if you're Joe Brady and if you're Josh Allen and the Bills, you want to be able to take advantage of the in-between zone. So in that linebacker area between the defensive line and the secondary, they want to be able to exploit the matchups there to try and get guys in space. So, bubble screens and slip screens and, shallow crossing routes and things like that. Those are going to be all important parts of the game where it's not going to be either run or deep. They're going to have to find that middle ground and be comfortable living there until something opens up further down the field. And, sometimes that's a challenge for Josh. We talked about that before. But he's going to have to, I think, for lack of a better term, just stay patient until things really open up for him. And if he can do that, I think we're going to be able to move the ball effectively. And then once we get in the red zone, then, be able to pound it in. So it may not be a game where you see a lot of big explosive plays. And we know Josh is a big fan of those. But I think it could be one of those games where we see a lot of longer developing drives.
Yeah, man, and just like you said, this attacking this part of the field, and in a playoff game where we assume the Steelers will try to take Diggs out as much as they can, it might be an important game for Kincaid and especially for Shakir, who's developed really well as this slot guy, right? He's been playing better and better each past week, and it might be an important game to use those guys even more, to game plan for some stuff for those guys even more this week, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, and on the other side of the ball, man, we already talked a little bit about Mason Rudolph, obviously not being a huge threat. I think he's done a decent job, obviously, as a game manager and avoiding turnovers, right? But with this kind of weather, and I really don't feel like the Steelers will throw the ball if they don't need to, right? They would really definitely need to throw the ball to start being aggressive with Mason Rudolph, or if they are way behind and are forced to do so, right? But how about that offensive line in Najee Harris, that run game? How do you see a path for the Steelers to win this game? We know that the Bills are better. We know that we are in a better situation. But if the Steelers are to win this game against Randy, how do you see they doing so?
I mean, I think from a running game standpoint, they got to try and be able to take advantage of angles and be able to, you know, get yardage when they can, be able to set themselves up to move the ball. I don't think they're going to be able to do the big plays. So, you know, being able to get in those third and short situations, to get a first down and continue drives is going to be important for him. Mason Rudolph, you know, from a quarterback standpoint, he's in a lot of ways you want to play him the same way that you play Tua. You want to take away the deep shot because he does throw a very nice arcing deep ball. And then, you know, you want to take away the middle because he doesn't throw those intermediate out areas with a lot of velocity. Is one of his big drawbacks coming out of the draft. So you want to kind of force him into making those type of throws or trying to get downfield at a lower percentage. But what you don't want to let him do is take advantage of that short and between the hashes intermediate area that will allow his guys to get yardage after the catch, which is basically the same game plan for Tua. And I think the way that we do that is that we play tight over the top and then, you know, try and generate as much pressure as possible. Getting to him is going to be super important. And if we can do that, I think it'll be a very long day for Pittsburgh.
Yeah, man, and getting after Mason Rudolph, it goes through our defensive line, obviously our pass rushers, and we've seen recently 2 weeks ago we saw Von Miller inactive, right? And last week against the Dolphins he was active again, and now it's playoff time, and there is no time anymore to give the player snaps to feel better, to get back on his best or your best physical form, etc. So it's all or nothing right now. And so if Von Miller is active, it's because Sean McDermott really believes he's able to impact the game and to help this defense to play better. With what we've seen from Von all year long, the last game, and him being inactive 2 weeks ago, what do you think? What would you do in McDermott's place? Would you keep Von Miller active for this game in a hope that he can flash his old self, he can make a play when you need the most, or you would go with other guys that might be in a better situation physically right now and keep Shaq Lawson for obviously a guy who can play the run really well, and have Kingsley Jonathan being a wild card in this pass rusher group, since Epenesa has been important in the rotation as a pass rusher, and Groot and Floyd have been really great.
Yeah, I mean,
either active or inactive, man.
I think this week I would probably leave him inactive. I think I would keep Lawson and Kingsley Jonathan in there, and let Von. You know, he looked like he was kind of limping a little bit maybe last week, so I would let him rest this one out. I know it would be a tough call because you want to have that, you know, that threat of what he can bring to the table on the other team's mind. But you know, if he's not 100%, you don't want to potentially lose him for the rest of the run. There's hopefully 3 more games after this, and I think that the guys that you have waiting in the wings behind Von can do, you know, a good enough job to be able to get through this game. So I would sit him this week, not because of performance or anything, even though he hasn't really performed all year very well, but just for the sake of health and future planning.
Interesting. Man, and I want to also talk about this group of pass catchers from this Pittsburgh Steelers offense. We know you already talked about Rudolph, about his limitations, but he still can be pretty accurate throwing the middle of the field, and that deep ball that he was famous for when he came out during the draft, right? For throwing those deep shots and have some big plays. He has a nice group of pass catchers here with Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, even Allen Robinson, who might not be the same Allen Robinson we saw in the beginning of his career with Jaguars and even with the Bears, but still, and Pat Freiermuth, right, the tight end. So it's a well-balanced group, a group that I really believe, comparing to our group, we have Diggs, but then we now have Shakir and Kincaid stepping up. But I feel like this group is more well-rounded, or maybe more dependable all around. It's a dangerous group. Uh, how do you feel about them doing damage for this Bills defense, and with this weather and with this quarterback situation?
Sure. I mean, I think that especially the two main receivers, Pickens and Johnson, if they obviously, they're both incredible deep threats if you can get them the ball deep. But in that intermediate area, especially the crossing over the middles and the deep and shallow crosses, those are things that we have to be able to defend and keep a lid on, because that's where they can hurt you. That's where they can keep up with us blow for blow. Is that if Rudolph can hit one of those and the guy takes off like we saw the last couple of weeks, I mean, it's going to keep it interesting. So I think Freiermuth is kind of a chain mover in the same way that like Dawson Knox can be. He's not quite as dynamic as I think Kincaid is, but he's kind of in that wheelhouse of Dawson Knox or slightly better. So he's a valuable target. He's definitely one that you have to account for if you're Buffalo and you don't want him to go on these long, time-consuming drives. I think Pittsburgh's name of the game this week is going to be to limit the number of times Josh Allen touches the ball. They don't want him to have the ball in his hands, as much as any. I guess they want him to have the ball in his hands the least amount of time as possible is the best way to say it. So if I'm Pittsburgh, I want to devise a game plan that's going to take advantage of matchups to try and to try and move the ball down the field methodically, chew clock, and then when there's the opportunity, take a shot to try and hit a haymaker to put us on our heels. As defensive coordinator, I think Sean McDermott and his staff, they know that, and so they have to counter that attack. And ultimately, I think talent takes over, and we are going to be able to do that more often than not to win this game. I do think it's one of those games where McDermott's going to want to rely on his defense a lot, and we'll see how that affects the time possession and a couple other things. But
Yeah, yeah, man, we talked offense, defense. We don't talk enough special teams sometimes, and the Bills just ended the season with our punter and our kicker playing maybe their best football this season, right? And especially our returner. It was so good to finally see Deontay Hardy, who I've been asking for a long time right now about an explosive play from Hardy, and it came in the best time possible, right? They will be able to impact this game as well. Those weather games, special teams are huge sometimes, right?
It's always a wild card in the playoffs, man. Special teams in the playoffs can make you or break you. I mean, we've seen it over and over again over the years, and last week is a perfect example. I jokingly put out there, I said, worth every penny. Deontay Hardy never had a doubt. And we've been talking about how it's, he's kind of been a waste of a signing so far up until that point. So, yeah, I mean, special teams, it's three phases of the game: offense, defense, special teams. They're just as important. And hopefully we have all our T's crossed and I's dotted this week.
Man, what's funny, because by week 18 I was that set on bringing on my old tweets about, look, that's why we had to have sign DeAndre Hopkins. We needed him. Sheffield has been a bust from free agency. Yeah. Hardy has been a bust. And then week 18 arrives, and we have DeAndre Hopkins making plays for the Bills, right, against the Jaguars. And we have Sheffield and Hardy making the best plays also to help the Bills getting in the playoffs. So at the end of the day, it seems everything worked properly for the Bills, and Brandon Beane knew best, right? He knew better than me.
Yeah. Trent Sherfield never had a doubt, right? Never had a doubt.
Yeah, it was all planned. Yeah. Bills Mafia, hit that like button, subscribe to Buffalo Rumblings channel, check out also Apple Podcast, Spotify. This episode is available there. Uh, Randy, I have some comments here in the comment section. My guys from Brazil also commenting here, all right? And I have one interesting comment here that I want to bring. It's from Marcel. His name is not out there. It's Os Irmãos Sapequinhas. It means like the saucy little brothers. Okay, the translation for that.
All
So
right.
Marcel is their father. All right, and he commented here. Harris has improved a lot in the last 4 games, mainly running between the tackles, which is our flaw, or I feel like he meant or weakness, right?
Right.
I want to put some context on here, Randy, because we have a color commentator here in Brazil. I refuse to call him an analyst, all right? So I will tell you a color commentator, all right? And he was criticizing the Bills, and he was on one. Actually, he kind of copied the comments from US that the Bills wouldn't make the playoffs in the beginning of the year, right? And he stuck to them all year long, and he said that the Denver Broncos would make the playoffs and the Bills wouldn't. So he died in that on that hill, all right. But one of his opinions about the Bills, one of the reasons he disliked the Bills, he used it to say, or he continues to say, that the Bills defense is bad, right? And he says the Bills defense is bad because they were the 28th ranked against the run, according to him, and they were a bad defense. And he said the Bills defense was playing well. He said he said the Bills defense was playing badly against the Dolphins because the run game from the Dolphins was working. Yeah, it's crazy. Just like I told you, it's a color commentator, not an analyst. Okay, but anyways, so some people believe the Bills defense is weak against the run, and I totally disagree. And I tell people all the time about how McDermott defenses work and how he's okay with people running the ball as long as they enter third down situation and you have an opportunity to get out of the field. So they kind of control their other team's run game. That's the reason they never get out of nickel defense. They always defend more against the pass and the big play than against the run. As long as people are running for 3 yards and or they will have some big runs here and there, but as long as you can get out of the field, McDermott will be fine with you running the ball. I feel like the Bills defense and the way McDermott sees defense kind of fits in this mode, you know. So what could you tell people about this comment about Harris? And I really like Harris, and I really respect the Pittsburgh Steelers run game, but I don't feel like the Bills have a weakness against the run. I feel like it's totally controlled, and here and there we'll have some problems against some strong run games, but I don't feel it's a weakness. How do you feel about it, Randy?
I mean, I think some people are being a little bit of a prisoner of the moment in a certain aspect. I mean, we don't. So Miami was effectively running the ball in the first half, but as I mentioned, in the second half, kind of went away. In terms of Pittsburgh, pull up Najee Harris. You see that the last 2 weeks he's gotten over 100 yards. However, last week against the Ravens, Week 18 can be a bit of a liar sometimes because they played a lot of backups and Baltimore basically conceded that game. So those 26 carries for 112 yards looks nice on paper, but with the context of the game, I don't think it's as impressive as maybe some people might think. I think Najee Harris can be a capable back, but he's a volume back. If you look over the course of the season, and I got that pulled up over here, so they were basically it looks like they were doing a committee because he didn't top 20 carries a game until the last 2 games of the season where he had 27 and 26 carries. So, I mean, I get it. I think historically we've kind of struggled a little bit with the run over the past in this McDermott era. but I'm not concerned about it being like an Achilles heel type thing where it's going to be the running game is what's going to break us. They're going to have to throw the ball to loosen up the run game to be able to make plays, and I don't think they're going to be able to do it very effectively.
Yeah, I agree, man. I agree. I really feel like, just like I told you before, there were some games where we saw, okay, that windstorm game that I already mentioned here against the Patriots, where they run the ball all game long and we never really controlled it. Or actually, there was a big run by Harris, and other than that, they kind of controlled that run game. But still, and there were other games under McDermott where we had a tough time to stop the run against the Saints. I remember against the Jets. I remember one against the Chargers.
Well, the most notable one is the Kansas City game where they were bound and determined not to let Mahomes beat them over the top. And they ended up running it. How many times did they run it that game? 40 some odd times or something for like 200 plus yards. I mean, they just got, stampeded over. And that's really been like the worst rushing defense performance that we've ever had. But aside from that, I mean, I think here and there have been issues of, some holes in the run fits where somebody gets loose once or twice. But, I mean, overall.
Here and there, a lot of things happen, right? Here and there, you will be blown out. Here and there, a lot of stuff can happen here and there. So I feel like it's not a weakness also. I believe the Bills are more worried with the passing game normally than the running game, because that's how the football is played nowadays. That's how the game is played nowadays. But I feel like it's all controlled. I know there are fewer times where I look at it and I feel like, oh, the Bills lost control. They can't stop the run. No, it seems like they are controlling the game. They are making other offenses get into that third down situation where the Bills have an opportunity to get out of the field. I really feel like this about this Bills defense.
Yeah.
Oh, and I feel like we need to mention this year we faced the Raiders with the league's rushing champion from a year ago, early in the year, and we held him for negative yards or few yards, less than 10 yards. I remember negative yards at the halftime. So it's not a performance that you can do if your defense is a poor run defense, right?
Yeah, and keep in mind that yards are one thing. Yards are, kind of sometimes they make headlines. Oh, so he threw for how many yards, or he passed, or he ran for how many yards, or whatever. But it's about points. Mm-hmm. It's about touchdowns surrendered and touchdowns gained. And going into our defensive statistics here, I can pull up that opponent touchdowns per game is 2. That ranks number 6 in the league.
Yeah. So if yards were Tua would be the best quarterback in the league according to yards.
Yeah, and offensively we score 3.2 on average, which is good for number 6 in the league. So we score more than we surrender. Plain and simple.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, some people just they want to prove a point so badly that they pick whatever they can, and that's the situation with our dear color analyst that we have here in Brazil.
Well, and that's the joy of numbers, is that you can make stats and numbers say whatever you want based on whatever your perspective agenda may be. So a guy like, I know somebody mentioned that this guy is like your country's Nick Wright. He can take a specific set of numbers and stats and say, oh, well, look, in this range, Josh has been bad. Like, this is why I don't trust Josh. Completely ignoring the whole picture, the bigger picture that says this guy is one of the most dangerous players in the league. And if you catch him on a heater, you're in big, big trouble. So 100%. I'm not a statistician at all, but I know enough to know that you can manipulate numbers to say whatever you want them to, which is why in some respects I like using stats to prove a point. And in other respects, I kind of take it with a huge grain of salt when people are leaning really heavily into the numbers because they don't tell the whole story. The game is played on the field. It's not played on a stat sheet. It's not played on a spreadsheet. It's played on the field.
Yeah, totally, man. And Randy, to close it out, and it's still in this subject, we talked about Josh, we talked about numbers, right? And I want to hear from you about this MVP because I believe, despite Bill's Mafia is still trying to make a case for Josh with his crazy production, his total touchdown numbers, right, and this winning streak, the Bills with the seed two. It seems like Lamar Jackson is the favorite to get the award again, right, the second time in his career, and it's probably happening, right. But there are a lot of crazy stuff happening because, for example, Pro Football Focus just picked their all pro teams, right? And they had Lamar Jackson as the first team quarterback and Josh Allen the second team quarterback. And when you look at Pro Football Focus own rating, who's the best quarterback in the league according to their rating? That we know a lot of people say we can't trust Pro Football Focus rating. It doesn't matter and things like that, but they have their own system. They graded Josh the best quarterback in the league, but they picked Lamar Jackson as the first team All-Pro quarterback over Josh. What I can't explain. I don't know how Pro Football Focus.
Oh, it's easy to explain. If anybody's ever told you that wins aren't a quarterback stat, they're lying to themselves.
Yeah.
All right. Well, while I fully understand that it's a team game and that the quarterback is not responsible for the majority, of the reason for why a team wins or loses a game, I get all that. I've listened to the whole Bruce exclusive breakdown of all that. Yeah. I get it. I know where he's coming from, and I respect his opinion. But in terms of media and the way that they view players, wins are absolutely a quarterback stat. It's a factor in the MVP. It's a factor in all pros. It's a factor in Pro Bowls. It's a factor in everything. When they talk about elite players, they're not just talking about their own individual performance. They're talking about their team record. And that's why the MVP, Lamar Jackson is in the conversation because his team's a number one seed. But has he been the most valuable player, in the league? No, he's been the most valuable player for Baltimore because they don't have Mark Andrews this year, but he's not the MVP. All right. If anything, and a lot of people want to discredit this guy because of the system that he plays in, but he's been operating the system at the most elite level of anybody that's played in it in recent memory. And that's Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, the last pick in the draft, who's got the Niners as the one seed. And who is he's number one. I don't have the chart pulled up, but he's number one in like QBR and all these, a couple
EPA,
different ratings.
Right?
Yeah, EPA, something like that. He's number one in like several different high-end categories that are usually indicative of who wins the MVP. So if you want to talk about the MVP, it really should be between three guys. And that's Josh Allen, Dak Prescott, and the leader in the clubhouse should be Brock Purdy. It should be Brock Purdy. And all respect to him, that's a hell of a story going from last pick in the draft to MVP, isn't it? And a Super Bowl appearance against the Bills where he comes up just a little bit short would kind of be the icing on the cake, right? In my opinion, I think it's between Josh and Purdy. I think Josh accounts for so much of the team's offense that it's hard to ignore him in the conversation. The fact that he's got, over 40 offensive touchdowns on the year, you can't. To discredit that because of turnovers, of course he's going to have turnovers. The ball is in his hands more than any other player on the team. It's going to happen. But they're the number 2 seed. Despite all that, he's got 40-plus touchdowns. He should definitely be in the conversation.
Yeah, man, I totally agree. I feel like Josh already has a couple of seasons where he put up MVP performances, and unfortunately he didn't win. One year, Aaron Rodgers was also awesome, and it was a toss-up between two of them, and unfortunately, Aaron won it. And I even felt that year Josh deserved the kind of Peyton Manning, Steve McNair treatment. Remember when they shared an MVP? They were co-MVP, yep. And I felt that year Josh deserved it. And this year, man, I really believe again he deserves it. There is a lot of lately, there are a lot of people trying to put a lot of stuff on Josh and calling him out and saying he should have played better. He should have thrown the ball better in some situations and stuff like that. But I feel like no player is put under a microscope like Josh Allen in the league, and it's difficult to expect or to demand for a guy who has the ball all the time, just like you said, demand perfection, right? It's
Yeah.
it's unfair, and I can see other guy who does more, all right, for his team than Josh. That's why he's my MVP, obviously, but
Well,
unfortunately,
the
I don't see
criticism
him.
that Josh gets is kind of one of those heavy as the head situations. He's got the crown of being this, this ultimate playmaker guy, for better or for worse. So every time he makes, I mean, he's a human highlight reel. He's a touchdown machine. They want to talk about a turnover machine. He's a friggin' touchdown machine. He
Yeah,
scores all the time.
yeah,
So, I mean, yeah, there's an inherent risk reward when you're that explosive of a player. Sometimes, things don't go your way, but I think he's a guy that should be in that conversation every year, and this year is no doubt. I mean, he has been explosive, especially
yeah.
down the stretch.
100%, man. I agree. I just want to address Pedro here, who sent a question. Pedro, we already talked about those struggles with McDermott and how he has changed recently. We are really hopeful that he can continue this way, just like he has done against the Chiefs, against the Dolphins, and closing out games with his defense and being more aggressive. And Randy, thank you so much, man, for taking your time joining us today. Again, you know that the Leading the Charge door is always wide open for you to join us and talk some ball. Always a blast to talk some ball with you. Enjoy it. I hope you enjoyed us as more as I did and as all Bills Mafia did. Thank you so much, man.
Oh, thank you, man. Always a pleasure to be on. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Bills Mafia will be back on Sunday in Portuguese for Bills Mafia in Brazil, Latin America, and all Portuguese-speaking countries with the post-game show. Hopefully talking about a big-time win against the Steelers, right? And thank you so much for joining us today. Hit that like button, subscribe, and see you around. Thank you so much. Go Bills.
Go Bills.